Let me say a few words about Mary Magdalene. The reputation she had in our traditions and in most common understanding is that she was a sinful woman, sometimes a prostitute, but a woman of bad reputation for sure. Now, this reputation, which is misplaced, it's a gross misunderstanding of Mary Magdalene, finds its origins way back in the end of the 6th century. There was a pope, St. Gregory the Great. He was a great pope. He was the one who sent Augustine, not Augustine of Hippo, St. Augustine of Canterbury, sent him to England to convert the English, and Augustine became the first Archbishop of Canterbury. So St. Gregory the Great was a marvelous pope, but he was a desperate scripture scholar. And all scripture scholars would agree now that Gregory made a great mistake in referring to Mary Magdalene. We even know the date of his major mistake, September 14th in the year 591. Pope Gregory came out with a letter, kind of a papal proclamation about Mary Magdalene. And he conflated chapter 7 and chapter 8 in the Gospel of Luke. Chapter 7 in the Gospel of Luke has the story about a sinful woman who anoints the feet of Jesus. Now, chapter 8 has a reference to Mary Magdalene, out of whom 7 demons had been cast. Now, Gregory conflated these two stories and presumed that Mary Magdalene in chapter 8 was indeed the sinful woman who anointed the feet of Jesus, the public sinner in chapter 7. There is no scripture scholar today who would agree with that. Not only that, but in chapter 8 and in other places in the 4 Gospels, there is reference to the 7 devils that were cast out of Mary Magdalene. But devils in the time of Jesus, somebody had epilepsy, that was considered devil. Somebody had a great disease or was in depression or went through some kind of an enormous burden in life, it was said to be the devil. You'll find that all over the scriptures. Chapter 9, we're reading in John's Gospel here. Chapter 9 in the Gospel of John has the man born blind. You might remember that story. And they say, why is he born blind? Was it his sin or the sin of his parents? Because it was a sin somehow that caused his blindness. It was a primitive misunderstanding. And it applies to Mary Magdalene in this case. She comes from a little settlement on the edge of the Sea of Galilee. And for years and years, pilgrims who are listening, you will all remember this, we had a marvelous guide which I used many times in the last 10, 15 years. Sammy, he was from Galilee, he was from Cana. And Sammy, whenever we got near Magdala, he'd tell the story of Mary Magdalene. She was a hairdresser, he would tell us. And she had long hair, and she was a prostitute. And I had to say, Sammy, let me give you the correct understanding of Mary Magdalene. Mary Magdalene was obviously a very close disciple of Jesus. Now, a patriarchal church may not want to give her that sense of primacy, but she was the one who announced to the apostles the resurrection of Jesus. She was chosen in God's providence to be the first one to proclaim the resurrection of Jesus in this Gospel of John. So she's an extraordinary person. And certainly, every man needs a woman in his life. It somehow humanizes the person And that must be true for the humanity of Jesus. The fact that she was very close to Jesus, she was a bonded disciple of Jesus. This is very, very important. There's nothing unusual or scandalous or ridiculous about it. It makes all the sense in the world in human experience. So I want to redeem the reputation of Mary Magdalene. And all scripture scholars will agree that conflating chapter 7 and chapter 8 in the Gospel of Luke was a major, major mistake. I talked to one scholar who said Pope Gregory would get a D in scripture, maybe even an F, but certainly he would not be remembered for his interpretation of scripture. He's remembered for many other things. So I want to redeem the reputation of Mary Magdalene. For years she was a penitent one. She was a great public sinner. Places to redeem women were called after her. In any case, this woman has taken an enormous misunderstanding in remembering her. So I want to exalt Mary Magdalene as a true and bonded disciple of Jesus Christ. You talk about somebody who makes an intentional statement of her life. Now, there are very interesting things about her. She comes from Magdala, which is a little village there on the Sea of Galilee. Very scenic place, very beautiful. And why she isn't somehow attached to a husband has always been an interesting question. Could it be that she was never married? Could it be that maybe her husband had died? Perhaps one of the demons in her life was great, great sorrow or great depression. But there's an awful lot of personal information that can somehow be deducted from understanding where she came from, how she got the name of Magdala, named after the place from which she came, which was kind of unusual to be a person in the time of Jesus named after the place you came from. Of course, Jesus was called Jesus the Nazarene. That's very interesting for another time, what exactly it means that Jesus was a Nazarene. That's another discussion at another time. Maybe it means he came from Nazareth. Maybe it means something else. Well, now that we have redeemed the reputation of Mary Magdalene, let us pause for a moment of prayer.